Hi guys, very good morning or very good afternoon or very good evening based on the locations wherever you are. So this is my first tutorial on Agile, and before I begin, I want to introduce myself about my skill set, about my experience, about my work and everything. So my name is Deep. I live in Bangalore, and I have almost 6+ years of experience in IT, and I have worked on various skill set. It uh, uh, it deals with cloud technologies, it deals with testing, it deals with CRM, it deals with agile, it deals with waterfall, manual testing, then again web service and everything. So in these 6+ years of experience of my IT career, I have come across new terminology or a new process or a new method of software development called agile. And today I just wanted to go ahead and share this approach or share this methodology or the knowledge along with you all so that it can help you all guys who are in this IT industry to go ahead and clear the interviews or go ahead and understand what agile is all about, why we go ahead and use agile uh, in terms of software development, in terms of testing, and why all the people they are migrating to agile, why all the organizations they are migrating to agile. So let's begin. So first we'll go ahead and understand what do you mean by agile. So agile talks about incremental changes. It talks about how quick we are to adapt all those changes and everything. So the definition of agile would be that it's a software development process, or it's a methodology, or it's a framework, I would mention, by which we can go ahead and develop the software in a iterative approach instead of trying it at a once. So, what is the meaning of this iterative approach and everything? See, I'll tell you why agile first, then it would help you to go ahead and understand. So why agile? Previously, in our software development model, we have come across the generic terminology called SDLC. So what does SDLC represents? It represents software development life cycle, right, guys? And what is the meaning of SDLC? It has all the phases, or I would mention as a stages. And based on these stages, you have the requirement analysis, then you uh, discuss all the requirements, then you define the environments, then you build the software, and finally it goes for testing. And post testing, what you do is it goes for deployment, and after deployment it goes in a maintenance phase. So this is a generic SDLC. Now, what are the different waterfall models, or what are the different SDLC, we call it as, like software development models that we follow? So we have various models here. What are the various models over here? The various models are waterfall model. This was very popular around 2010, 2009, and uh, it was popular. It is still popular in terms of maintenance project and everything. I'll tell you what is the meaning of waterfall model and what are the various software development models that we do follow here. Fine. So we have waterfall model, we have RAD model as well, we have V model as well. We have agile methodologies as well. There are different methodologies in terms of agile. We have Scrum. Scrum is quite popular, and this session is all about Scrum and everything. So we have Scrum, we have DSDM, we have XP, and etc. We have many, two to three more. So what are these things? These are all agile methodologies. Now, these are the various type of so these are the things like various models. So these are the various models by which we can go ahead and we can develop a software. We have prototype model as well, right? So why I'm writing all these things in this particular notepad? I'm writing reason being just to give you a brief idea that what is SDLC, What are the common model of software development by which we can develop a software and deploy that particular software in a production server? Now, moving ahead, we'll talk about Agile now in a very brief way. So till now we discussed about what are the various methods of SDLC, or what are the various phases or stages that you can say. What are the various models that are applicable? We have waterfall, we have RAD model, we have V model, we have prototype, we have agile methodologies as well. Now, what is the meaning of agile? So at the beginning, I was mentioning that what is agile? So agile is a term, it's a term, guys, where we will understand that if a company or if an organization is using agile, that means you have iterative approach. Now, what do you mean by iterative? We'll go ahead, we'll define, or later on I'll make you understand each and everything. What is iterative and everything. Now, there is another word that you have to remember when we remember agile, that is incremental. Now, what is incremental? Incremental is phase by phases. Now, I'll tell you, I'll drill down, and this will help you to understand each and everything. So previously, what used to happen is we used to get the requirement from the client. So as you know, requirement is something which are known as user stories in Agile. I'll tell you what are the terminologies we use in Agile. So let me give you a brief idea why Agile and everything. We have talked about SDLCs, various models and everything. Now, there was a kind of software, uh, I would say software development model that we used to follow earlier. In terms of waterfall, I would mention. So waterfall, or in terms of RAD model, what we used to follow is the requirement would be provided by the client. Client represents the business itself who wants to develop a product for which you're working. Now, they'll give the requirement. We'll go ahead, we'll analyze all the requirements and everything. Based on our analysis and everything, we'll understand and we'll define all the environments and everything. So which tool we will use, which technologies we'll use, what type of resource we need, each and everything we'll discuss with the management as well as with the product owner as well. So in terms of waterfall, we don't have that kind of term, product owner. We have business. Business represents the client. Now, what they'll go ahead and they'll do, they'll go ahead, they'll define all the requirements and everything. We'll analyze, we'll understand, and we'll start working on that thing. The development team will go ahead and work. Correct. Post development work, what the dev people will do? The dev people will go ahead and migrate that particular code into staging environment. So here staging represents, I would mention, I'll give you like this. The development team will work. Okay. Day work, after day work, they'll deploy. The deployment happens where? In staging. Staging represents a kind of environment in this IT, in this information technology world. We define each and every place as an environment. So environment is a kind of platform where we go ahead and deploy. So what is the meaning of deploy again? Deploy is something that we are installing this particular feature or this particular software in this web server, which is in staging environment. So staging is helpful for testing. Again, it depends on project to project, organization to organization, but staging will be for testing. Staging can be for development activity as well. So ideally, the development people will work in the development environment. They'll move the code to the staging for testing. Now, what I'll do, the testing team will test. Fine. They'll give like for each and every requirement, they'll go ahead and they'll do the testing. Based on the testing, they'll raise defects and everything. Now, post sign off, there is a terminology called QA sign off. What is QA sign off? QA sign off is I have all the requirements, I'll test all the requirements, and based on those acceptance criteria, there is again a terminology called acceptance criteria. We'll go ahead and we'll remember each and everything in details. Now, what do you mean by QA sign off? QA sign off is I'm delivering all the requirements based on business. Correct. That is QA sign off. That means all the features are working fine. All the features are working fine. This is my sign off. Based on the business criteria, all the features are working fine. So these are all the testing ability and everything. Now, after testing, what they will do? The development team will go ahead and give a heads up to the business. Now, again, the business will go ahead and perform a UAT. This depends from project to project, organization to organization. Some organization performs the UAT on the live environment, guys, on the live server or on the live environment, I would mention. It depends. Some organization they goes ahead and they tell the development team, okay, fine. On that staging, there is another environment after staging. There might be a pre-prod environment as well. Pre-prod we call it as. So this depends on domain to domain. If it is a banking domain, there would be a pre-prod. Reason being, it's a highly secure domain. They cannot go ahead and deploy all the codes instantly to the production. They have a pre-prod after staging. So here in pre-prod, they'll go ahead and they'll do UAT. We call it as an UAT. And UAT will be done by the business people, guys. We are the employee of an organization. We won't be able to take part in UAT. UAT will be done by the business people only. Now, this is a typical model of software development and deployment and everything and testing. But there is one advantage. What is the advantage, guys? The advantage is each and everything is going stage by stage. Fine, it'll go. But the biggest disadvantage, what is the disadvantage, guys? The biggest disadvantage here is time. Why time? Reason being, it will take 3 to 4 months or 6 months to deliver a particular product. Takes time to deliver a product, right? Now, how to go ahead and resolve this issue? This was the case for waterfall approach or waterfall model. So people says that okay, the client has to wait for longer duration. Suppose you are an owner of a particular shop. You want to build a shop. You have to wait for 6 to 8 months to go ahead and see the complete product. So you have to hold your patience, you have to hold your nerve till that time. This model was very popular earlier. However, at present, there are various organizations, there are various business, there are various clients who are not satisfied with this particular product. They don't want to go ahead and wait for that particular long duration. So what is the approach to make it a shorter duration? They want a shorter cadence. They want a shorter time period so that they can go ahead and they can enjoy the look and feel of the product, right? There we go for Agile. So this is why Agile and what was the reason for moving into Agile. Nowadays, there are many organizations, they're moving into Agile. So now we'll talk about Agile. We have already discussed the term iterative, the term incremental, and why Agile. What are the disadvantages of waterfall and everything? Now, in terms of Agile, there are various terms or there is various terminologies that we have to remember in Agile. So first, the requirement would come in terms of user story, guys. We call it as a user story. So what will be there in the user story? User story would be written as like this: I as a client wants this dot 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 to be this dot 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 dot. So by this particular thing, you'll be understanding, okay, fine. I'll have all these things in writing, and these are all the user stories. These are all my requirements. In waterfall, these requirements would come in terms of BRS, we call it as business requirement specification. Business requirement specification. We call it as an FRS as well. Functional requirement specification. Functional requirement specification. Those were the days. However, time was huge. So here, in terms of Agile, we call all the requirements as a user story. So they'll have 2 user story, 3 user story, 4 user story, 10, 30, 40. It depends. So business will provide all the user stories, guys. Okay. Now, if we talk in terms of agile, the three most important thing is there are three things that we have to talk in agile. First is we'll follow Scrum methodology. What is Scrum? Scrum is an agile methodology. Okay, we call it as a methodology, or else what you can call it as, it's a framework, guys. We call it as a framework. What do you mean by framework? Framework are list of rules or protocols that we follow to deliver certain business in a good approach or in a right approach. That's what framework represents. Like in Selenium, we have BDD framework, we have hybrid. There is one concept called POM, page object model. So we'll talk about all those things later on. I work in Selenium as well. It's an open source tool. So I have a brief understanding and I contribute on a regular basis in my organization. Now, this is what we call it as. Scrum is a agile methodology or it's a framework, right? Now, there are three things that we have to remember in Scrum. What are those three things? Those three things are PO, we call it as a product owner. What do you mean by product owner? Product owner is the person who would define all the requirements, guys. Defines all the RQs. We call it as RQs, that means requirements. He is the guy. Okay, there is another guy who we call it as Scrum Master. Now, who is Scrum Master? Who manages the team? In short, this session is the objective of this particular session is to spread a brief knowledge on Agile Scrum, or on Agile methodology. Why Agile? What are the things that you have to remember if you work in Agile? So that after finishing this particular session of 1 hour or 1.5 hours, you have that confidence within you that, okay, fine, I know Agile. I can start work in Agile. I can clear interviews on Agile confidently. You have to tell with that kind of confidence, that kind of diligently, that kind of sincerity we'll have on this particular session. So, who is Scrum Master? Who manages all the work and everything, right, guys? Who manages all the work and the team. We'll talk about the responsibility of Scrum Master later on. There is another guy, we call it as a Scrum team, guys. This is called a Scrum team. So these are the three things that I've mentioned. What are the three things? These are the three things: product owner, Scrum Master, and Scrum team. Scrum team consists of dev team, or dev people, I would mention. Dev represents development. It would consist of QA, okay, QA team I would mention. It would consist of RM team as well. What is RM team or RM people? I'll mention RM people. What are RM people? RM is release management. Again, it depends on organization to organization that who will deploy for all the environments and everything. It can be the development team as well. It can be a dedicated RM team as well. To be on the safer side, nowadays various product-based organization uh, they goes ahead and they have a dedicated RM team for different projects. So you can have RM team, you cannot have RM team. It depends. Correct? Now, what are the different things that I have to remember in terms of Scrum, in terms of Agile? So these are the three things that you have to remember in terms of Scrum. If you're working in Agile, I have product owner. Now, what do you mean by product owner? Product owner will define all the requirements and he will have all the acceptance criteria, guys. Now we'll drill down in terms of acceptance criteria. What are the things that you have to remember? So there is a concept called acceptance criteria, guys. What do you mean by acceptance criteria? Acceptance criteria is the criteria, or is the condition, I would mention. Acceptance criteria, fine, let me go ahead and write it down in a good way. Yeah, acceptance criteria is the condition or the parameters, I would mention conditions or parameters for that particular user story. For that particular user story. Okay. for that particular user story. Now, if I don't understand that particular acceptance criteria, I'll go back and what I'll do, I'll ask that product owner that fine, I am not able to understand this particular requirement. I would request you to make me understand, please. So this is one of the acceptance criteria, and each and every user story will have an acceptance criteria. So this is one understanding. Now, what are the different, or I would say, what are the different artifacts that we have? What do you mean by artifacts, guys? Artifacts are, I would say, it's a doc, or I would say it's a terminology. Okay, it's a terminology which helps us to understand, okay, which helps us to understand the project activities or the deliverables. We call it as a deliverables in terms of product deliverables. Suppose I do a work. After doing that particular work, what do I call that particular work of that day? I finish certain amount of work. I have automated some test cases, and what do I do? So I have to tell, okay, I have some deliverables. Deliverables in terms of I have some work. So these terms or these terminologies are frequently used in organization. Artifacts. Okay, I have testing artifacts. I have development artifacts. Like in Selenium, we have the concept of Java doc. You have a Java doc. That is a separate thing altogether. We'll discuss on Java doc and everything. So that is one kind of artifact you can mention. Okay. So here, what are the things that I'm going to discuss is in Scrum, you have three artifacts generally. So what are those three artifacts? Those three artifacts are product backlog. One is product backlog. What do you mean by product backlog? Product backlog are collection of requirement. Okay, RQs. Collection of RQs. So here, each and every RQ is known as user story. Correct? As we have discussed in the beginning. So product backlog, you can say in another word, it's a collection of user story, right? It's a collection of user story. Why product? Why they have given that name? Reason being they're developing a product. That's why they have defined it's a product, right? And what is backlog? Backlog is a kind of cluster or a heap of requirements. Okay. We have another terminology in Agile called sprint backlog. What is sprint backlog? Now, first of all, I have to understand what sprint is all about. See, sprint is a small duration in Agile. It can be of 2 weeks, it can be of 3 weeks, it can be of 4 weeks. Maximum, it can go up to 4 weeks. Now, why Agile? We have already understood. What are the different Scrum methodologies or Agile methodologies I would mention? Scrum is one of the framework in Agile or Agile methodology. What is acceptance criteria we have discussed? What are the meaning? What is the meaning of artifact? What are the different artifacts we have mentioned? There is another artifact called burn down chart. So before going into sprint backlog, I'll mention what do you mean by sprint? See, here what happens is in Scrum, the delivery process is you have product backlog. Okay, you have product backlog. After product backlog, you'll have sprint planning. Okay, I'll make you understand each and everything. And guys, please bear me with the spellings and everything. The main objective is to make you understand what Agile is all about. You have sprint backlog. Okay, you have sprint, and post the completion of sprint, you have the product. Right now, what do you mean by Scrum? See, here in Agile, we generally follow a kind of incremental approach. Incremental approach in the, like, what do you mean by incremental approach? We'll develop the product in a small duration of time or in a small cadence of time. We call it as maybe 2 weeks duration or 3 weeks duration. And within the 2 to 3 weeks, your development, your testing, everything should go fine. If you have any kind of bugs, if you have any kind of defects, go ahead and raise. No issues. However, you have to deliver that particular product within 2 to 3 weeks of time. This is what Agile is all about. This is what incremental is all about. That means you are releasing the product phase by phases, incrementally wise. This is what Agile is all about. Previously in waterfall model, all those features, suppose I have 30 features or I have 50 features. So 50 user stories I have, correct, in Agile. In terms of waterfall, I used to have FRS. So I have 50 requirements and all the requirements would go ahead and the development will go ahead and deploy all the 50 features in one shot at one go. We call it as a big bang release in terms of waterfall. In terms of agile, we'll call it as an incremental release, guys. Incrementally, we are releasing phases by phases. Okay, suppose I have 50 RQs. What I'll do, I'll break all those RQs in terms of sprint. Suppose my sprint is of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Depends again on product to product, on organization to organization. It depends. Generally, it varies from 3 to 4 weeks. Now, on that particular 4 weeks, on the eve of 4 weeks, I have to deliver the like all those RQs. So, to make you understand, this product backlog contains 50 user story. Okay. In sprint planning, there is a meeting or there is a frequent terminology that we use is sprint planning. So sprint is something that sustains for 2 to 4 weeks. This approach is right, I believe, with you all guys. And we have to complete each and everything from estimation, from requirement analysis, from development, from testing, QA sign off, everything in that particular duration. So in sprint planning, what we'll do, we'll go ahead and we'll plan for user stories. Like how many user stories we can pick. We can pick. Now, this particular sprint planning has a lot of things associated to it. It's very interesting and it's amazing. First of all, we'll consider definition of ready, guys. We call it as definition of ready. Definition of ready. What do you mean by definition of ready? It's a very interesting way. See, it defines the ready state. It implements the user story has met some criteria or the user story has met some conditions before it can be picked up for a particular sprint. In simple language, guys, what is definition of ready? It means the user story has met some conditions. I'll tell you what are the conditions. There are around 6 to 7 conditions. Has met some conditions before it can be picked up for a particular sprint. As we all know, what do you mean by sprint? It sustains for 2 to 4 weeks, and on that particular 2 to 4 weeks of cadence, we have to build, we have to test, we have to deploy, guys. Correct? So the release activity has come down to incremental approach from waterfall approach. This is one of the advantages that we have seen in the market at present. Now, what do you mean by definition of ready? We have a simple word, we have a simple meaning attached to it is it has met some conditions. Now, what are those conditions? We have talked about sprint, we have talked about the artifacts as well. Now, what are those conditions of definition of ready? The definition of ready condition is the dev team has to understand the RQ properly. This is one of the major criteria, guys. The dev team has understand the RQ properly and they'll be able to work on it. See, in Agile, everybody is same. Everybody is same represents, I have a team. I have a team of 10 members. I have a product owner, I have a development team, I have a senior QA, I have RM team and everything. Everybody is same in Agile. Maybe my product owner is 10 years of experience. Maybe my development team or my tech lead is of 12 years of experience. Maybe experience wise he is more senior. However, in Agile we are all equal. There is no segregation, there is no deviation, nothing. So we have to go to that level with this particular sort of mindset that in Agile we all are equal. Everyone will contribute. The development team has the ability or has that particular capacity or that particular bandwidth to go ahead and write test cases. and it cannot restrict to unit level test cases only. He can contribute with the testing team as well. So in Agile, one thing you have to remember, everyone is equal. Maybe he or she is like they have more experience in terms of their career. However, everybody they are similar. You are on like everybody is on the same page. No one can be of different page. Now, as I've already mentioned, definition of ready. See here in Agile, what we have to do is we pick the user story, and before picking the user story, there is one concept called estimation. We have to estimate that particular user story. So I'll write this particular term. We have to estimate. Estimate what? Estimate the user story. Correct. What is user story? Again, user story are RQs that we already mentioned, right? How we can estimate? We have to estimate. There are many things that we have to take into account or we have to consider. What are the things? First of all, complexity. Complexity of the user story. We have to go ahead and we have to understand how complex is the user story. Okay. And as for estimation, there is one I would mention as a kind of term we use called story point. What do you mean by story point, guys? Story points represents the number of days, or it directly doesn't refer to the number of days. We call it as a effort estimation. Effort, like how many efforts are required. And generally people plays poker game. Okay, the Scrum Master. So generally the Scrum Master will go ahead and will take care of all these things. The Scrum Master will initiate this particular process, initiate the process, and he will set a meeting and everything. So this is called sprint planning and estimation. So here you'll have all the estimation and everything. In sprint planning, you will have all the estimation of story points and everything, estimation of user stories and everything. Who will do that? The Scrum Master will do that. He is the guy, and he has to be a certified Scrum Master. He knows each and every. So there are many games. I was a part of the poker game and everything. And how used to estimate 1, 3, 5, 8, 13. So maximum I've estimated on 13. You have 21 as well. So what are these things? These things are based on the complexity. Okay, suppose you have a lot more dependency on that particular user story. You have like you don't require many people, then you will estimate 1 or 3, and you have to justify, guys. And this estimation, one thing you have to remember, a lot of people they have a different understanding, but this particular estimation would consist of the dev task plus QA task. This is one of the important thing. This estimation would contain both the tasks. Don't estimate only for development. Don't estimate only for testing. No, you can't do that. Estimation would always be taken care for the two things. One is development activity, one is testing activity, guys. So based on this thing, based on experience, based on like how you work in Agile, what are the things that you need to develop, you have to go ahead and you have to write each and everything and you have to estimate, guys. So this thing would come with experience and everything. But this is a brief understanding of how we go ahead and how we estimate. See, estimation, it depends upon, I'll tell you what are the things or what are the conditions that we have to consider. We have to consider the complexity. We have to consider how many number of resources are available. Suppose in this particular sprint, I have only 2 resources, rest to development team or rest to testing team, they're on leave. So I have to take all this thing into consideration. Suppose the environment is gonna be down. So I generally work on Salesforce. There is a CRM application called Salesforce. We'll have a separate tutorial on Salesforce as well, in terms of testing, in terms of administration, everything. But suppose there are maintenance phase that is going on in Salesforce web server or in Salesforce production server, we have to take that particular time as well. So there are a lot more things we have to take in terms of estimations and everything. Suppose we have an integration testing or we have an integration development. So we have to prepare all the integration components as well. We have to prepare all the integration applications as well, so that I can integrate my application to another application, and that requires certain amount of time. So based on each and everything, I have to estimate, guys. So what did we learn in terms of estimation? We learned what are the story points. We have learned user stories, and we have learned a brief idea of how to estimate all the user stories, guys. Now, Everything comes under definition of ready. Why did I uh, talk about the estimation in definition of ready? Reason being so that you can understand it very clearly. So definition of ready again. The user story has met some conditions. These is one of the condition that you have a proper estimated user story. Guys, one thing is very clear, or it should be very clear. Don't pick any user stories without estimation, or just like that. Okay, I can do that. I have that particular knowledge and I can do that. No. Estimation is provided by gut feeling. You have this experience earlier as well. I can do that. I can finish up this activity. Fine. Based on your gut feeling, you go ahead and do estimate. But don't pick any user stories on a particular sprint without a dedicated story points. This is one of the criteria of definition of ready, guys. So there is two things. One is definition of ready, one is definition of done. So these are the two things, and there are certain points as well. Definition of ready I'm writing. Later on I'll do definition of done as well. So these are the points that you have to keep in mind. They're fine. I have so this user story has met the definition of ready. I can pick it up, or anybody can pick it up, right? So these sort of activities, it will happen in definition of ready. Okay, so we have finished what estimation is all about, what story point is all about, and the poker game and everything. And in terms of estimation, remember one thing: the scrum master will play an important role. He is the guy, guys. Product owner will go ahead and define all the requirements in terms of user story. Scrum master is the one. He should be a scrum certified and everything. He will have each and every understanding in terms of requirements and everything, all the estimations and everything. He will play a big role in terms of estimations and in terms of a complete activity in sprint and everything. He is the one guy. Fine. Now, here again, another thing is that we have to keep in mind is acceptance criteria. We call it as AC. AC is defined. AC is defined in terms of acceptance criteria. We call it as acceptance criteria. Fine. Acceptance criteria should be defined, guys, and it should be very proper. It's not like a kind of one-liner statement or a two-liner. If you have any understanding or any misunderstanding or any miscommunication, go ahead and talk to your Scrum Master, talk to your product owner. These are the two people who can go ahead and resolve this particular issue. Don't wait for anyone else. Don't think that, okay, if I go ahead and if I raise this particular question, what he will think. No, in Scrum, each and every person or each and every individual are on the same page. We do respect each and everyone personally as well as professionally. Fine. Now, another one is environment should be ready, guys. Environment is a big challenge. Environment is ready. Until and unless, suppose you have to develop this particular application in a different environment, and that particular environment is not working fine, you cannot pick that user story in that particular sprint. No, you can't. In sprint planning, you have to go ahead and you have to say proactively, see, I cannot pick this particular user story, reason being the environment is down. It's quite simple. So these are the certain things you have to go ahead and you have to understand. Now, based on the business value, we call it as a business value. See, in this world, in this information technology organization, we call everything as a business. Why business? Reason being, we work for business. Business is client. We work for a client, right? So we call our client as business. So don't get scared or don't get deviated from the term that why Dave is using this particular word called business. Business represents client. Okay. So based on the business requirement, I have to understand the RQs. Please don't uh, yeah. So please don't pick any user stories which you have like a bit less knowledge. You should be very clear what to do and what not to do. So there is a kind of to-do list we maintain in this Scrum, and there is a Scrum board as well. So there are three colors, and we call it as a card. Okay, each and every RQs would go in a separate cards. So green is for like we have completed that one. Pink is for we have doubts and everything, and we have a bottleneck. Bottleneck represents we have a blocker, and amber represents that is not working. So these are the different like these are the three cards that we do now. So these are like definition of ready and everything. The development team should be aware of what to do. Business should be clear based on the requirements and everything. Acceptance criteria is defined. User story is estimated. That is that's why I have like I was discussing about this estimation and everything in definition of ready. Okay, and environment should be ready, and the main thing is resources should be aware of. Okay, resource represents people. We call each and every one is a resource. Reason being, I have different skill set as well, and based on the skill set, we call it as a resource. So resource is present. Suppose on the beginning of that particular sprint, on the eve of that particular sprint, that resource is on medical leave. So we have to make sure we have a backup resource for that as well, right? The work cannot get hampered or cannot get delayed. So this talks about definition of ready. We have definition of done as well, guys. We call it as a DOD. What is DOD? DOD is definition of, please bear me with the typo error and everything. Definition of done. What is definition of done? Definition of done, there again, there are some conditions by which we can understand that it is completed. This is the similar meaning, and this is a kind of simpler meaning. By the help of definition of done, we understand, okay, this particular user story has met all the criteria and it is done. This particular user story is completed. So the first thing is code review, guys. So for development, we have a code review as well, right? So the code, we have a like different testing tool as well to review the code percentage and everything. So we have SonarQube, and we have another tool as well. In Salesforce also we do have a code review, and it does like we don't have to use any third party. Everything is on cloud, and it is being integrated with Salesforce. And we'll talk about Salesforce in a different sessions altogether. It will be a kind of brief discussion. But in terms of code review, they have to pass the unit testing and everything. They have to, the development team will do the unit testing, and it should work fine. It should work fine. Okay, unit testing should be done by the dev team, and we have a code review or peer review, anything. So code review should be more than 85%. So they have different criteria. Again, it depends on product to product, organization to organization, application to application, but it should be done by their peer or their tech lead or anything. Okay, so this is one criteria of definition of done. Another criteria is non-functional. We call it as a non-functional activity or non-functional requirement. You can call it as non-functional activity or requirement are met. RQs are met. What do you mean by non-functional? Non-functional represents performance testing. Okay, it represents or it includes load testing, or it includes stress testing. I have not done performance or load or stress testing ever, but these are all non-functional requirements. If that particular user story is attached to any non-functional activity, it requires non-functional activity attention, then definitely those non-functional activities should be done. They are met, they are finished before delivering that particular user story to client or to production. So this is one of the condition, or this is one of the parameters in definition of done, guys. This is very important. Okay, we have a release note preparation as well. There is a concept of release notes post every user story completion activity. What is release note? Release note is a documentation. What documentation? Documentation is about the feature, about the feature that should be done and published. Acceptance criteria are met. AC, I'm using abbreviation AC. Acceptance criteria are met so that the product owner can go ahead and accept that particular product. Okay, that condition by which I can go ahead and I can say, fine, my acceptance criteria has met. Suppose I want to build a laptop and my bezel should be a thinner one. That is one of my acceptance criteria. My optical mouse trackpad should be a thinner one with less width and less height, right? So if these two criteria are met, I have met the acceptance criteria of that particular user story. So acceptance criteria should be met. Okay. Another thing, if you have to give some demo, okay, give any demo to business, make sure you complete that activity. It can be done by any BA represents business analyst. It can be done by any development team. It can be done by any testing team. Reason being, agile, we all are similar, we all are equal, we have to be on the same page. So definition of done has this criteria as well. Okay, now in terms of testing activity, manual test cases should pass. Manual test cases should pass, guys. Okay, manual test cases should pass. automation, test automation, including Selenium or any proprietary tool. You can use Tosca, you can use Provar, anything, guys. So in terms of automation test cases should be authored. Authored represents you have developed all those scripts in Eclipse or NetBeans or any other tool that you use using Python, C Sharp, anything. I generally use automation using Java, and I use Eclipse IDE. So on Eclipse IDE, I use Java to code and everything, to develop all the scripts and everything. So automation test case should be authored and executed, guys. And the DSR, in the DSR represents daily status report. In DSR, you should publish the report as well. Which report? Your execution status report. How many test cases are passed? How many test cases have failed? If you have any integration test cases, you can automate those test cases. You have to manually go ahead and you have to manually execute those test cases. You have any data exhaust scenario, you cannot go ahead and you cannot automate that. Reason being, you cannot data drive any scenario from a third-party Excel file or JSON or XML. Then you have to manually go ahead and you have to manually execute those things. So definition of done has this particular criteria as well. Okay, deployment needs to be complete, guys. Deployment needs to be done. This is called deployment. Deployment represents you are deploying or you are installing this particular user story to the production server, right, for the UAT people and everything. So these are all the things that needs to be checked. And by this particular understanding, I think you have a brief idea of definition of ready and definition of done. Now, we have talked about definition of ready, we have talked about definition of done, we have talked about artifacts. Now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll tell you, or I'll tell you what are the things that I used to go ahead or the agile people or the agile team will go ahead and will perform. See, after this definition of done and definition of ready, what we have to do is there is another thing that we have to take into account. What is that particular thing? I was talking about product backlog, sprint backlog, and burn down chart. These are the three artifacts. So now you know what do you mean by sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is in that particular sprint planning will define, okay, or will pick certain user stories on which we can go ahead and we can work. And definitely we have to meet the definition of ready on those user stories and everything. Estimation needs to be done and everything. So we will plan the user stories here. Okay, we'll pick the user story, we'll plan the number of user stories. That would be perfect. Yeah, the number of user stories that would go on that sprint. I cannot pick a particular user story which requires 13 story points. I can pick that. Reason being, I have to deliver that particular product within 2 weeks. I can do that. So for that, what you have to do, you have to split that particular RQs, we call it as. So in the next agile session, I'll tell you what are the meanings of splitting that requirement, or if you have a complex requirement, how do I go ahead and perform that particular development or that particular testing. We'll discuss in brief. So this is what sprint backlog is all about. We have a burn down chart. So see, these are all agile terminologies. What do you mean by burn down chart? It tracks the progress of the team. It tracks the progress, like each and every day. What are the things that you're covering? We have another terminology called velocity as well. Velocity. What is velocity? It again measures the progress. And in burn down chart, we have to burn, like how many user stories we have burned. Burn means we have completed. Okay. So you have different terminologies. Now, the main thing that I wanted to go ahead and make you understand is the flow. First, it happens like product backlog, then sprint planning. Now you're all aware of what is sprint planning and how it happens and everything. Okay. There is a, like, it's a kind of meeting that happens with the Scrum Master, with the Scrum team and everyone. Okay, and how many user stories we can pick and everything. Okay, sprint planning. So after sprint planning, we'll have sprint backlog. So this thing will come here, sprint backlog. As we all know, what are the things that happens in sprint backlog. After sprint backlog, the sprint will start. Okay, the sprint will start. It can be of 2 weeks, it can be of 4 weeks. Remember, guys, in these 2 to 4 weeks, depends on product to product, organization to organization, project to project. It can be service based or it can be product based, anything, it depends. I have seen many people on, like I have 6.5 years of experience in terms of agile and everything. So I have seen people doing fortnight release. Fortnight represents 15 days release. They have a sprint of 15 days. So on the eve of 15 days, they'll release that particular product. I have done that thing. I have seen organization releasing product in a month. So it depends on product to product and everything. It depends on business, how people, like how those people wants their product to be delivered. But they will follow agile. And I think it's the best practice and it's the best way to develop a kind of product. It's one of the best way, agile scrum methodology. Believe me, guys, this will help you to crack any interviews or to gain knowledge on agile scrum. You'll be confident after hearing this particular session, guys. Now, this particular sprint will start. The dev team will do the development activity. The QA team will do the testing activity, guys. Everything. Okay. And finally, sign up would happen, guys. Okay. After sign up, you'll have potential, we call it as potential shippable product. This is the, what do you mean by product? Product is all the features that you're working. Okay. Here, product represents user story completion. Here, product represents user story completion. That means RQ's completion, right? We have delivered that particular RQ. That means we have delivered that potential shippable product. Okay. Now, there are three things, or not three, I would mention. There are, again, an important thing that is happening or that happens in Scrum. Let me tell you. What is that important thing? We have daily Scrum meeting. We call it as a stand-up meeting as well. What do you mean by stand-up meeting? See, stand-up meeting would be of 10 to 15 minutes, not more than 10 to 15 minutes, guys. This is reason being, many people they generally questions me. They've the stand-up meeting goes up to for an hour or maybe more than 45 minutes. You should go ahead and raise a question to the manager. Reason being, in Agile, everyone are same. So stand-up meeting should be 10 to 15 minutes. What are the things that we'll discuss? What I am working on, any challenges or blocker. Okay, please bear me with the typo and everything. What I will work on. So these are the things that we'll discuss. What I'm working on. So you have to stand up. So it's not like you have to sit on your desk and everything. You have to stand up. You have to go to a meeting room and everything, or a discussion room, or you can do that like in a phone as well. Suppose you have an onshore offshore model. Your onshore tech lead or your onshore member, they reports to some part of the world which is not in India. That's what is called onshore. And you're sitting here in Bangalore office or in Pune office or in Hyderabad office. You can attend the daily stand up or the daily scrum call in a meeting, like in a WebEx or in a GoTo, anywhere, in a Skype, anywhere. But it should be 10 to 15 minutes. What I'm working on, what are the challenges, what I'll be working on. Okay, like tomorrow, what I'll be working on and what I have worked on, any challenges and everything, any bottleneck, any dependencies. Okay, any dependencies. So this thing you have to keep in mind that this is one forum. Okay, any dependencies. This is one forum where you have to speak, guys. Everyone has the right to speak. Everyone. And it should not be more than 2 minutes. It should be 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes of time. Go ahead and speak. Okay, so this is very important. Daily stand-up meeting or daily scrum meeting. This thing you have to understand, guys. Now, after the completion of this particular sprint, you have a retrospective meeting as well, guys. What do you mean by retrospective meeting? Retrospective meeting is a meeting where you would discuss what went well, okay, what went bad, okay, how to improve, any kudos. You can give any kudos to team. These are the things that you'll discuss in a retrospective meeting. Suppose you can mention, okay, fine, the dev team has given me all the RQs in a proper time. So I have ample amount of time to test and everything. Generally, what happens, the dev team takes a long. Generally, what happens, the environment goes down. So those sort of scenarios you will discuss on a retrospective meeting, guys. You'll have a kind of cards. All those things will be shared on your Skype meeting and everything, and you will write down all your points and everything manually, and you'll discuss that what are the things that went well, what are the things that went bad. Maybe the BA was not able to communicate, there was a kind of misunderstanding that happened in the testing, and the tester was not able to test. There was a kind of misconfusion like among the team and among the development team. All the developers, they were not clear about the requirements and everything. It happens guys, based on my understanding. It happens very frequently. So all the people in agile, what you have to do is, see, one thing in agile you have to consider: change is constant. The requirement can change very frequently. That's why it is called as agile. So you have to adapt to the changes and everything. Fine. So this is how you can go ahead, and this is how you can adapt. Okay. So in this particular meeting, we call it as a retrospective meeting or a sprint review meeting, we call it as. So don't get scared, or don't be in a kind of dilemma that what do you mean by sprint meeting or sprint review. So this can be called as sprint review meeting as well. So certain organization, they represent this meeting as a retrospective. Certain organization or some organization, they represent this meeting as a sprint review meeting. Okay. Okay, so what went well, what went bad, how to improve anything, like any recommendation that like anybody in the team, they wants to improve the process, to improve the team structure, anything, okay? And you can give any kudos to the team as well. Like you can clap and you can say, okay, fine, this person has done the right thing. This person initiative was the right thing that has helped the team to go ahead and develop the product on time. So agile represents time, guys. You have to, there is a typical deadline, and you have to deliver that particular product within the deadline, and you have to complete the development activity, the testing activity, the sign off and everything. Okay, the demo, if the demo is to be given to the client, you have to go ahead and give the demo as well. So this is what agile is all about. Okay, this is what this particular session was all about. Okay, why agile? We talked about the legacy model of, like we call it as a waterfall model. We talked about various methodologies as well. So Scrum is widely used in the industries, and we have different terminologies. We talked about different terminologies and everything, and these are the things that we call it as in Agile. So these are the things that you have to remember: that what is sprint, what is product backlog, what is sprint backlog, what do you mean by sprint, what are the, like, what is the duration of sprint. Okay, if any automation is required, I'll talk about automation in a separate way. Reason being, we have a different approach called in sprint automation. Okay, so we'll have a different session altogether in terms of automation. And this particular session, I think you have a brief idea what agile is all about, how to go ahead and work in agile, what is estimation, how to estimate, what is user story, what is that poker game that the scrum master will go ahead and play, what is product owner will he will define, or he or she will define the RQs. He is the sole person who understands the business. So you have three things in agile or in scrum. What are those three things in scrum? You have a product owner, you have a scrum master, you have a scrum team consists of dev, QA, RM team, etc, etc. Dev and testing team will be a part of Scrum team. You have your RM team as well. So it depends of, again, organization to organization. But these are the three things. Okay. So I hope you enjoy this particular session, and we'll discuss more about Agile, the interview questions and everything. We'll drill down like what are the challenges that we face in terms of estimating complex user stories and everything, and what are those mitigation plans and everything. So I hope you have enjoyed this particular session. So thank you for sharing your valuable time and everything. Thank you, guys.